Hi everyone, I'm Chris Kennedy.
Yeah.
I run a tiny little publisher called Chris Kennedy Publishing that puts out at least a book a week. Put out 65 last year, 72 the 2 years before that. We do science fiction, fantasy, a little bit of alt history, urban fantasy, primarily mill sci-fi, but we're doing more fantasy here this year, and looking forward to talking about both magic and space, I guess.
I'm Bill Blume. I write a wide variety of fantasy. My most recent one is part of why I wanted to be part of the panel, Rest of Apocalypse. It's got a lot of magic, a lot of sword fighting, and planet hopping in it. Though I will confess, they never actually go into space. They just travel through space.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's kind of how mine works. Hi, I'm J.E. Pittman. You can just call me James.
Hi, James.
Hi. I don't have my own publishing company, but I do self-publish. I've got my main series, Felix Chance, Urban Fantasy, but one of the reasons I'm here for this panel, I'm particularly proud of Pandora Squad, which is mill sci-fi, but they are esoterically super enhanced soldiers, so they're beefed up, sent off to a planet to die, basically.
Nice.
So I've found a lot of magic and sci-fi like intermingles in my work. Not only Pandora Squad, but my web serial True Tales of Elliot Shaw, Adventurer. It is science fantasy, essentially. It started off as just fantasy adventure, but I decided, well, these floating continents are on a broken planet, and here are scientific underpinnings and the ancients' technology and stuff that's still having influence today. So, appearances of magic, some of it's Clark's third, so it just kind of all blends together for me.
So what do you guys want to know?
Yeah.
Well, let's start by fielding questions from the audience, since none of us are actually the moderator. And normally when I'm the moderator, I have things prepared, but since I don't have anything prepared, let's start with questions, and then we can talk about other stuff to get us through.
Sounds good.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, well, the reason I came to this panel was what intrigued me is that most theories of magic seem to call upon something from the earth, call in the spirits of the ground or the air. So how would that work in space? What are they calling on?
Ooh. I've never actually, well, all right, so actually this does kind of lead into what I wrote. I didn't think about that, so it's the same, but yeah. No one knows what the hell dark matter is, or dark energy for that matter. And it's like, it's one of those things that for a fantasy writer, that's gold. Because that's like, you get to take it, you can do whatever the hell you want with it, and until they figure it out, you don't look like an idiot. So for me, the characters in my book, like I said, they don't actually go into space, they travel through it. There are these spheres that are called dark energy tunnels, and they enter the sphere and they pop out on another world in the galaxy. And so for me, I took it when I was doing my research for this book, and I pulled in all sorts of weird stuff, but that was one of those things. I was reading a lot of space books, and that was one of those things that stood out to me. I was like, I can play with this. And in fact, part of the reason I went with a sphere, and I kind of cheat on the physics with this a little bit, but the reason that they enter a sphere and not like a door or a circle is because the most natural shape in space is a sphere. That's why most planets are shaped that way. And so that actually kind of informed how I approached that. But there was a lot of science that shows up near the end of my book, what causes the end of the universe, for example. A great book to read, Katie Mack's The End of Everything. Brilliant book, it's nonfiction, and she just makes it so entertaining to read the end of the universe and the various ways it might happen.
I don't think that you necessarily have to have anything, but you certainly could. Whether it's dark matter, dark energy, the best thing is it's fantasy, so you can make it up. Perhaps it's the galactic wind that's charging some sort of particle, and as the planet goes through this one place, it ramps it up, and so there are times where it's stronger and times that it's leaner. I mean, let's get right down to it. At the end of the day, it's the story that matters. The magic stuff, that's cool. The technology stuff, that's cool. But what's the story? So how do you need it to work for the story? So if you need something that's constant all the time, maybe it's dark matter. If you need something that kind of comes and goes and makes it, where all of a sudden I'm going to throw this massive spell and all of a sudden the magic kind of dies. Oops, now what do I do? So you could use something like the galactic wind or something where you're traveling through this area of space and, what do you need it to do? Tell me what you need, I'll tell you how to do it.
So, Physics 101, energy is energy. Nothing's ever created or destroyed. What you're talking about is a localized frame of reference for the use of different energies. So if you go out into space, it's just basically scientific energy manipulation codified in a magical or arcane sense. So, to what Chris was saying, it is, what you can logically use to underpin your story and make internally consistent. So you set up your system, you abide by the rules you set up, just like you would abide by the rules of physics in like a hard sci-fi. And as long as you maintain your internal consistency, I think it's all cool.
Yeah.
I mean, take lightsabers, for example. From a science perspective, they make no sense. None.
No.
No one cares. They're fucking awesome.
Flashy laser sword go vroom. Yes.
Cut people in half. Yes.
Yeah. So, you get to
But
have
again,
fun
it
with
maintains its own internal consistency.
Right, yeah. So other questions? Hit us. Anything you got? If not, we'll improvise.
Yeah, we'll improv.
Semi-brilliantly. All right, what topics were you think? Oh, sorry, beat me to it.
How would you have characters, you want to, but how would you have your characters interact with one another? Where you have people who practice magic and people who go, what?
Well,
Same way you do now.
I mean, there are series that have that. The David Weber, Joel Presby series, Hell's Gate, is one of the books. I forget the others. But there's a series of parallel universes where one's technology, one's magic, and you're able to cross over.
Split infinity.
Yeah. So I mean, once again, what are you trying to tell? If it's the conflict of, if that's the story, the conflict of technology versus magic, you can certainly set it up that way. Whether it's on two continents of the same planet, whether it's parallel universes and they're crossing over, whether it's two planets in the same solar system, then one's able to teleport over to the other. Meanwhile, the other ones are sending rockets over. How do you want them to interact?
And one thing I was saying, hopefully this will be the last time I reference Star Wars, but probably not. Think about Han Solo.
Well, it's space magic, so
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
Han Solo versus Obi-Wan. It's like I trust a blaster at my side, not some hokey old religion. Not everybody in the galaxy may be aware of the magic system, and they are relying more on the technology. So, or they've maybe never seen proof of it, etc., stuff like that. So it's all about the perspective and their experiences. Like going even beyond Han Solo, like a Mandalorian. Din Djarin had no clue what the Force was, and it was after the events of the main movies. So obviously the galaxy at large did not necessarily partake of the religion or know specifics of it. So you can have different characters with different experiences and different, Han Solo can't use the Force. There's some characters that can't use magic, so they have the blasters at their side. Other characters do have magic, and they immerse themselves in that aspect.
I kind of following on that. One of the things I do think is kind of fascinating, no matter how you feel about the midichlorians, that was introduced as a concept within the prequels. I think it is kind of a neat twist that the people who most scientifically quantify the Force are actually the practitioners of it, and the ones who give it its mystique. You wouldn't necessarily expect that, and so in that sense, it's actually kind of a really cool twist.
And there's lots of different ways you can go about that. Is it more interesting to be on the side of technology and you're exploring the magic and getting into that kind of realm, or is it better to know the magic first and be able to use your powers for whatever and people aren't expecting it? You know, what do you want to tell? Because you could do either way and both could be fun, you know.
So another question that maybe you could talk a little bit about is the distinction or the difference between viewing magic and science as separate entities versus one as being based on the other. For
Well-
example, magic actually turning out to have a scientific underpinning to it.
Right.
That wasn't well known before.
There's been a lot of bleed over in that. The more you codify a system of magic, the more it operates like a programming language.
Mhm.
So again, maintain those internal rules. If it is a super elaborate system of magic that has like, circles or other inscribed things, just think of that as like circuitry. You can apply sci-fi thinking to magic concepts and mesh that magic into the science fiction part of it. And vice versa, you can take that science fiction and immerse it into a fictional story. What I was doing with Elliot Shaw up here, I set out to tell a fantasy adventure action thing. And as I got deeper in the universe, I realized, all right, this is going to be far future. This is going to be set on a broken world. So I came up with the mechanics of how that would work and how all this technology evolved and how everything, bringing Clark's third, everything from the old super advanced technology that is lost, there are a few people that can use it now, looks like it's being done by magic. So there is a lot of bleed over in between the two if you take different approaches to it.
Yeah. I don't know that I can say it better than you just did, honestly.
Well, I mean, I think the important thing out of all that was that whatever your magic is going to be, before you get to writing the story, you need to know what it is. You may not ever explain exactly how it works, but you need to know in your mind how it works and what the system is. And the system is probably going to be something that makes sense and could very well be a science-y physical thing. Okay, in order to do this has to happen, and this, whatever it is. But there's probably some sort of scientific principles for how the magic actually occurs, or a way of codifying it.
Right.
I mean, I guess it boils down to magic and science are basically a matter of POV.
Exactly.
Okay.
For some people, they see something, they're going to think it's science, so they're going to look at it as magic, and there are going to be some people who just look at it as both, as interchangeable, even for themselves.
And another trick I pulled with Felix, one of the main characters is an immortal alchemist. So it is old school magic science, legit. One thing I love, do you guys know the NASA hydrogen Blume method? All right, so back when they were developing the space program in the original days, they would get hydrogen leaks. The dangerous thing about hydrogen, it burns with a clear flame. So they would have it build up in hallways, and you don't know you're about to walk into fire.
Oh, God.
So they would hold a straw broom out in front of them, and if it caught on fire, they did not go down that hallway.
That-
That's what you mainly use in canaries.
Yeah, exactly.
It's same thing. Steam leaks in high pressure steam systems, like on Navy ships.
Right.
You don't see it until it cuts off your arm.
Exactly. So what I did, I took that same kind of scientific principle and I made a labyrinth trap that's full of invisible flame, and I used some alchemical terminology, and I called it protium phlogiston, because they used to call phlogiston the element that created the flame, the invisible element that escaped from things as it burned, and then protium is just another word for hydrogen. and then I'm going to work in tritium phlogiston, which is a whole lot more dangerous. So, you know, it can be far future, it can be antiquated, and so pulling back on alchemical roots from, you know, first, second century, or even BC to the Middle Ages with the Hermeticists and things like that, it is antiquated, archaic, scientific classification. It is the roots of modern chemistry, but with a very mystical aspect because they didn't know much about it yet. So you can bring that same kind of terminology, that same kind of feel to like a modern day story, or even go further and project it into the future.
Yeah. You had a question?
Oh, I was just going to mention there's an author named Faith Hunter, and her witches have to do it mathematically,
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
which meant that I, hopelessly mundane here. And then, as far as you're talking about the alchemy, have you ever read the 1632 versus stories of Dr. Gribblewatts?
I haven't, no.
No, he is a alchemist that the good people of Grantville contact to make aspirin. And somehow, word of little blue pills and alchemical theory of colors make an unholy alliance, and all their aspirins are blue.
I'm gonna have to look into that because I got real deep into the lore with alchemy when I was researching that character because I was trying to figure out. I honestly had to take a hard sci-fi approach to that character because there is established precedent for what works, what doesn't. I had to logically fit the system of things he was doing into it and add in a little bit of, you know, the less well-known, the elixir of life stuff, because like I say, he's immortal. It's like that, yeah, he made that using these few ingredients, you know, but like the protein phlogiston, I was like, I need this term to be right. I went back and pulled out naphtha, which is like a proto-diesel fuel, essentially. So I literally took science and worked backwards with it on that.
That's cool.
So you can totally do that with magic in space, is you take your science, you work backwards with it, have them not understand it. I really like that approach because like I said, I did far future with Elliot, and I'm just like, okay, how do these scientific geniuses figure out how to live on a broken planet, and why do they not know it anymore? They just accepted this is how it works.
Yeah. Other questions?
Okay, well, how do you guys work in your magic in space? For like, story purposes.
For story purposes, yeah, it's like there were two approaches I took with it. The characters in my book, the main character especially, she's the last of the Knights of the Way, and the Knights of the Way all are armed with crystal swords that are indestructible because a piece of their soul has been put in the crystal. And when they get that piece of their soul put in the crystal, it forms into a sword that fits who they are. For that, it was just, the idea was a lot of the magic she does with it, she doesn't have a lot of expense to her from doing it because she's paid it up front. That was the one approach, the upfront payment. So the stuff she does with the sword doesn't impact her too much. Every now and then she'll get some headaches and stuff from some of the stuff she does, which explains why she doesn't do it all the time. But that's kind of how I approach that. Now, she also, in the course of the story, gains possession of a grimoire, which actually she refers to as a book of dark science. But she also has to use it with an untamed crystal. And this crystal cannot be merged with a person in the same way that the blue crystal is that's used to form the swords. In this case, a payment has to be made each time you use that crystal in order to do something with it. In that case, it is typically blood, and usually the blood of the person casting the spell. And the shape, and the more they use it, the more that does take on a certain shape. For my character in the book, it eventually takes on the shape of a dagger. But one of the things I never quite explain, and I kind of leave for most of the readers to pick up on, is she encounters this other character who is a member of the people she's hunting, the 13 who are immortal. They don't have blood anymore. They don't bleed. So they can't use their own blood. They have to use the blood of others. And so this one member of the 13, her dagger, ambrosia crystal is what it's called, has taken the shape of a spike so that it can be easily dipped. And so that was kind of how I approached that. It was a lot of fun kind of doing that, and I enjoyed being able to approach that crystal being a very complicated one to use. Part of the fact of being called an untamed crystal. In her case, it was one of those things that she screws up a little bit using it at times, and that provided a lot of plot opportunities for me.
I love that, having the unique one and having it gave you a lot to develop her character with as well. Kind of reflect a lot of her internal stuff with the external.
It also gave me an opportunity to kind of vary the story a little bit, which was kind of useful because it's a sword and sorcery book, and I was talking about that on the early sword and sorcery panel. It would have been very easy to just let every act of the story involve a really cool sword fight, but it would have gotten really old really fast. Being able to kind of approach it with the idea of her having to use that magic to find other stuff, to like get the information on how to find the way to kill the 13, that actually provided me a way to get the variety in there. How about you? How have you been using it?
I don't have a story with magic in space, so I don't.
Do you have any fantasy magic stories where you inject science fiction?
Nope.
Nope.
All right, so what are your favorite examples where you've seen it?
Well, the Weber series that I mentioned, I really loved. It's still going on. They're still writing. I read the first couple books in it, and I thought the juxtaposition.
There you go.
There we go. Get it to it.
Words are hard.
Words are hard, especially Sunday.
We're writers,
Yeah.
not talkers.
Yes.
Raining to make the words go.
Yeah.
It does.
Of the two, the magic and the science and the conflict, I thought was really cool. Been a couple of years since I read them though, so I'm trying to pull it from the back.
So when you're talking about your grimoire, that kind of tickled an idea I had, and I just recently seen used in a show I was watching. This guy it's an isekai, but this guy is learning these new spells and learning this new magical power and stuff, but he transfers back and forth between worlds. And so his teacher's like, okay, you need to get a grimoire going. So he's thinking your classic book and whatever. And the teacher's like, you're holding it in your hand. It's just a fancy way to write down the spells so you can remember them and then recall them and use them. So, that's a really cool blend of putting like traditional magic concepts into updated technology, or even configure something else far future to act in the same way of these modern things.
Like, I guess one thing you could look at is like lit RPG. And if you had a fantasy lit RPG where you're going up in level, what is the science behind that? How does that happen? How does that work?
That's science and math and magic.
Yes.
Lots of math.
So I mean, there's a lot going on that, where you could be putting in the sciencey principles into how the level up occurs, and how do you get more mana? How do you get more? How does all that work? So there's. I think that's something that could be the juxtaposition of science and fantasy there. How depending on how you worked it.
Yeah.
Traditionally, people tend to think of magic and technology as being antithetical to each other. You can have one but not the other. Clearly, if you're going to do magic in space, you've got to have different ways of dealing with that. Maybe using technomancy or whatever. Has that been something that maybe you struggle with when trying to write magic in science fiction? Trying to remind yourself, yes, magic can work with your computer, maybe. Or maybe you decided, no, the magic tends to make the computer act up, so you have to change something.
So for one of my stories, I'm not gonna. This is version on spoiler territory. one of the characters is a synthetic being who essentially operates magic. So yes, they can work very well together. In this story, so the soldiers who get sent through the portal to fight the giant reanimated husk of dead spiders, again, technological reanimation of mechanical manipulation of the dead. They are esoterically superpowered. I came across this really cool apocrypha called the Sword of Moses, and it's basically all these angels doing these specific things for the wielder of the text and the spells. And the reason why is because God said so. So it's kind of you get this, you do this, and you get this output. And why are angels doing this? Well, because their boss said to do it. So each of the guys makes a pact with one of these entities, angels, aliens, whatever. I haven't disclosed that yet.
Sufficiently advanced beings.
Sufficiently advanced beings via quantum metaphysics. They can do their magic, but they're given certain enhancements. So, for instance, the guy here with the nuke on his back, his rider, as I call them, is essentially a spirit of knowledge and professor. So he's sent through with a dead man switch and a failsafe on the nuke. So if they all die, it blows. So he's like, well, I'm going to magically use my advanced knowledge to hack a railgun into this and power the railgun with the nuke that I'm carrying around. So yeah, it can definitely work together, especially if you have a spirit of intellect, kind of, Bobish of Dresden Files, guiding you along the way in the technology aspect. So again, suitably advanced beings or suitably advanced technology, nearly indistinguishable from magic. I mean, I have some theories where these things are just making a quantum tunnel pact in the brain, and they're just hijacking these guys and using them as, essentially viewports.
I mean, for me, I take the approach where it's almost just treated interchangeably, in the sense that the characters really just kind of regard them the same way. It just kept it simple for me, and it's why, like, near the end of the book, it starts off more with like magic, but as you get deeper into the book does make a transition from fantasy to sci-fi, and that's when it starts getting into things like CBR, cosmic background radiation, and expansion of the universe and the potential collapse. Stuff like that comes into play in the last act of the book.
As you get to more explaining the why and the how of...
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, because part of the whole thing is, how did the 13 manage to become immortal? And honestly, it's the weirdest damn thing I've ever written, which, given some of the stuff I've written, that actually is saying something.
That's always fun, though.
Oh, yeah, this is why it was one of the most... Honestly, I've said it before, I'll say it again. This was like creative heroin for me. I got such a creative high from writing this book. I will be chasing that high the rest of my life. And that is a problem I'm very happy to have. But it started off as a lark. The first book my wife ever lent me, if y'all don't mind me indulging a little bit. The first book my wife ever lent me when we dated in high school, back when there was only 2 books so far in the Dark Tower series, was The Gunslinger. She was the one who lent me that, which probably doesn't usually go that way, but my wife was the one who gave it to me. Humorously enough, it was her ex-boyfriend's copy of the book, by the way. I got the woman and I got the book. So it was absolutely. It was the weirdest damn thing I'd ever read. It totally changed the way I looked at fantasy. And years ago, I was between projects, didn't know what the hell I was going to do, and I said, you know what, I'm going to do like a series of novelettes, kind of in the style of The Gunslinger, because that's how The Gunslinger was originally written, as novelettes. And I was like, I'm going to plan out an arc, and I'll just do something weird. And it was like, I said, I'm going to start off the story in a similar place to Roland, make it the character a young woman, make it where they all use swords, hold on to the Wild West motif, and just see where it goes. And I started it in a similar place. That was the thing. It was a thought experiment, and it turned out to be a passion project that I did not know I'd been waiting all my life to write. It was just this weird hodgepodge of all the weird shit I'd been absorbing over the years. Astrophysics, sword fighting, I use all sorts of different swords in the book. It's absolute sword porn in that sense. For anyone who loves a variety of swords, you will see a lot of them mentioned in this book.
What's the book's name?
West of Apocalypse.
Oh, is that?
That's the book, yeah.
I just came in, so.
No worries. We are leaving it open to the audience to ask whatever questions they want, because we have no moderator, so we're letting y'all kind of moderate. So if you have questions, throw them at us.
We're riffing. So
Yeah.
if there's something specific you want to know, just shout it out, whether it's craft.
We've got a
our
question
favorite-
over here.
Oh, sorry.
You mentioned earlier that in some settings you have some worlds that are basically magic-based and others that are technology-based. What would first contact look like from perspective of the magic users?
You want to go to the
Could
Vulcans?
could be that
I
they
was gonna say, I
teleport
thought
in.
about
What?
that. We were talking about the Vulcans earlier in Star Trek. You kind of get that a little bit. The Federation never even quite gets a grasp on Vulcan mysticism, as they call it. To them, it's just completely foreign. Even in Star Trek 3, you see it kind of getting.
But how do the magic users make sense?
In that
of
case, I
this
think
technology stuff.
I think in that case, it almost is hard to equate it, only because for the Vulcans, they've embraced both. And so it is a little hard to kind of work that.
So maybe for the magic users, they see their, techniques as completely normal, and to them, the scientific is the equivalent of the magic, because they have no understanding of how it's used. So first contact with that would be similar to, I'm trying to think of a good example. But like when a regular person would first discover magic, it's like, how does this work? It has the desired effects, but I don't get how it works, and it's completely anathema to everything I've ever known. So are you talking about like the magic users actually coming through space?
Well,
No.
I think-
Magic users are living their best life.
So the
Most of these
technologically
things come down from space.
okay.
they're gonna see things as magic. For example, a laser is gonna be something that's magical.
It's a light
that's-
spell.
It's a new kind of magic.
Right, it's just a new kind of magic. How does a gun fire? Well, somebody puts a spell on the bullet so that when you pull the trigger, it fires. They're going to see things the way that makes sense to them, and they're used to magic, so they're going to figure out how these magic things work, even though it's a kind of new magic that they haven't seen before.
And from a previous panel, part of it would be important from the perspective of the person that they ask. You have this thing that fires projectiles and makes big holes in people that we don't like. That's really cool.
Yeah.
How does it work? If I'm an armorer, the answer's different than if I'm, grunt number 12.
Right.
Now-
I pull the trigger and it fires. Versus
Now-
the armor being able to tell you exactly how it's constructed.
I will-
Just from a writing perspective.
Now, there's a flip side to this scenario. You're kind of looking at from the idea that the technology is going to kind of move in and plant itself there. Now, let's go the other way with it. C.S. Friedman did a series of books called the Cold Fire Trilogy. The book Black Sun Rising, you get to see this. You don't really see the beginning of it, but you get to see the outcome of what society has emerged from this kind of thing, where these people go to this world to colonize it, and they're not prepared for the magic that is there and how it's going to affect them. And it's like you get to see how that's kind of devolved the technology in a way. And that's kind of cool. I like the way she approached that.
There's a lit RPG that I didn't even know what it was. I can't remember the guy's name, but a human somehow gets transported from Earth to a planet that's high in magic. And he goes through, he learns how it works and everything. But as you're reading, you realize that this is not a low-tech world. They have vehicles, but you have to have the magic power that runs them.
Oh, makes sense.
They have other things that instead of medicine, they have the magic potions.
Right.
They have industries to make all this stuff.
So it's essentially
It's
the
just-
evolution of magic into
So they
modern
didn't
systems.
develop scientific principles. They actually have real gods running things. And so the god of knowledge gets involved because she basically comes to him and says, no, you cannot tell them about the scientific method or I will be annoyed. They have to find out themselves.
One should not annoy the gods.
Right. And she was, you know.
Someone asked if you were
his
God.
Yeah,
You
Say yes.
Yeah, because he was an atheist. So now you have an atheist from a planet where you don't actually experience God directly by them appearing. And his attitude when the God of War showed up, he didn't kneel. He was like, I don't care who you are. And that got his reputation way up. And the God of War was impressed. He says, okay. And then the knowledge God showed up and says, because part of the story, and it's like, no, you can't tell them about scientific method. They need to figure it out. Well, they're almost there with astronomy and stuff, but they ascribe it to magical principles, weather, magical principles, because that's what they grew up with.
Mhm.
But it's still almost as technology-based as us. It's just different. It was a really good story. And of course, as you do things, you go up in power and stuff. And so you're basically, once you're one of these heroes, you're not really human because you're a lot tougher. But it's a fun romp. I'm trying to remember the author's name, and I can't. But he's got like 7 or 8 books out.
I've seen a lot of that kind of thing in the lit RPGs and your anime.
That was my first experience with that. I didn't know anything about it.
Anime's been doing that for a long, long time, and I'm literally struggling to pinpoint very good examples. But one back to your question, I remember one called Gate, where this magical gate transports, it's kind of the flip side of what you were asking. This magic-based society with deities and whatever, this empire invades Tokyo. And they get through and they start pillaging and doing everything, and the initial shock and surprise, it is horrible, it is vicious. Then the soldiers are looking around at all these giant steel spires and the glass structures, and they're like, what kind of weird magical land have we come upon? And then the soldiers show up and put them full of holes, and they have magic fire-breathing weapons and whatever, and then retreat back through the gate. And then, of course, the gate's open, we're going back through because they came and attacked us. And they see all of the weapons and the technology come through to their land, and they see it as magic. So even one of the deities is impressed by their death-dealing spells, and she is like the goddess of death. So you actually have a goddess of death worshiping the firepower. So it's an interesting dichotomy and reaction to similar ways of thinking about things based off your present experience and applying that to something you've never seen.
Isn't there a series, The Wizard in Spite of Himself or something like that? It's in space, it's technology, and the hero is a human who lands on this planet that has magic. Of course, he doesn't have magic, but he has high technology. So he has like a mechanical horse.
Mm-hmm.
And he ends up being declared a wizard to the king, and adventures ensue.
I mean, we're going
Christopher
back.
Stasheff, yeah.
So we're going back to,
So there's your connection.
or like Kid in King Arthur's Court, or
Yeah.
Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. I'm in another world with my cell phone. There's a dozen animes that do it now, but it's a very well established, long running.
One very clever scene though is talking about technology. He carries a rapier because he's a little bit more modern. He knows more about using rapiers. He doesn't know anything about broadswords. and he decides to go see somebody important, and the guard objects, and as he draws, the guard's like, "Rah!" and he just puts the point to his throat. And the guard's like, turns to the other guard and says, "Who would have thought about using the point?" So the mindset is
Oh, yeah.
where you gotta go. So,
So I like to think, going back to Chris's point about story use, magic is the tool of the author wizard. So we just use it to tell the story we want to tell. We can codify it, and we need to codify it so everybody can think about it logically, great. If you want to take a little softer stance on it, to still accomplish your story needs. Like, for instance, I wrote a little short once where two guys are essentially rock hopping in an asteroid field to, do some mining.
yeah.
And they're just shooting the shit as they're doing their
Right, they're
mundane
miners.
job. Yeah. And they're talking about, yeah, man, did you see where this new thing, people are being able to do these weird things on the planet now? And he's like, yeah, man, I got this theory that, magic is like this puddle. And on Earth, we were going through this puddle in space. We've moved out of that puddle in space now, so we can't do magic anymore. But we're on this planet now that is in that puddle. It's that power,
Right.
So
Yeah, I've seen
all
that.
of these old things are awaking in humanity. Like, they used to be able to do stuff, and it's like, oh, shit, I can now cast fireball or whatever.
Yeah.
I've got telepathy going on. So I think it's really fun to play with.
That sounds like fun.
I mean, I feel like it's really, when you're trying to approach magic, no matter what the setting, it's just a matter of how you portray it from your point of view character. It doesn't matter whether they're the person who uses it or whether they're the person observing it. If you can write it in a way to where the reader will believe it, it's all about getting it right from that character's perspective. If they have a reaction that doesn't make sense for who and what they are, that's a problem. There's kind of a hesitation for Aileen when she's trying to do the magic because she knows she's not well trained to do this stuff, except beyond what she does with her sword. And so, yeah, it's like when she's approaching that, she's a little daunted. I mean, hell, the book she's using, the point that's made about the book is that the reason they gathered this grimoire is not to actually do the spells. It's so that they can recognize the crap not to do. And she's still using it. So she knows she's kind of doing stuff she's not qualified to do and is dangerous inherently, but she's just desperate.
Mhm.
It builds stakes.
Last question.
If you can explain it and define it, is it still magic? What makes it magic as opposed to just, well, that's just how things are right now? I mean, we don't understand all our science. The placebo effect works sometimes even if we know it's a placebo and nobody knows why. Isn't that magic? So where do you define the line between magic and science?
Henwavium.
I mean, yeah, you get to have fun with it.
Yeah. That's a great question.
Yeah.
And some things that, you're absolutely right. We don't understand that we put down to magic. Maybe it's science we don't know yet, but maybe it's magic. I mean, and it's, once again,
Arthur C. Clarke's quote.
right,
Clark's
You know,
third.
sufficiently
Right.
advanced science.
right.
Clark's third. I'm going to go back to a panel I did this morning with Dave Butler and say magic is what the other guys use. The root of the word actually meant what the Iranian fire wizards, the Magi, use, the techniques they use. So magic was literally what the other guy uses. And that's where the origin of the word came from.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it comes back to what you're saying. It's like, to the guys who are well versed in sorcery, magic is what the other guys are using. Magic is the technology.
Then
So
there's Jim Butcher.
Jim
Can you
Butcher,
imagine
who,
having a book where there's the observer watching him? Like, what the hell?
now Jim did a very clever thing in the interplay between magic and technology, and he was like, no, they don't work at all. I'm not going to worry about
Right.
doing this because
Right.
it will blow up in my face.
Right, right. but could you see the observer, a short story where somebody sees,
Yeah, someone who
Imagine.
can't see the mystical energies, who can't see what's going on, and just sees this guy in a big long trench coat spreading a circle of salt around him and muttering some words and just standing
Some-
there really weird.
and then something happens.
And then like a dumpster like crumples into itself.
Right. Or he just points a stick, and the next thing you know, that's all on fire. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want that flamethrower.
Again, magic.
Yeah.
Maybe Elon Musk could make
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the fact that it kind of forces him to not be able to use science.
Yeah.
It's just brilliant. You're right.
The
You're
closest
absolutely
thing he gets to
right.
science is Bob.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. He's the computer.
Mm-hmm.
Though I still don't understand why he can't use a hot water heater that could be, 3 rooms away. It's always cold water for him.
It's fun to inconvenience them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah.
that's exactly what it is. It's for story purposes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to make it hard for him.
God, yeah.
Oh, God, yes.
Well-
I'm waiting for somebody to explain to him. You put the hot water heater 4 floors away, you'll be fine.
I imagine it's like that in the castle now.
Yeah, I was thinking.
Marcone did some upgrades.
I think Harry just kind of beats up on himself and he just assumes that.
That's a lot of
everything's-
it, is externalization of internal conflict.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh, I can't wait for the next book.
So I guess we'll wrap this up
Yep.
and we'll just go down and tell everybody what we got going on. All right.
Come see me at chriskennedypublishing.com.
Yeah.
Where do we get West of the Block?
You're looking at them.
Got the source right here.
Yeah, but it's also on all the major platforms. So if you prefer e-reader, for example, it's on all. I mean, you can get it on bnn.com, Amazon, everywhere. I've got it on there. BillBlume.net is
Okay.
where you
Do
can
have a
find
Kindle
me.
version?
Yes,
Oh,
absolutely.
because I don't have any room in my house.
No, I totally understand that. I feel like a traitor because I'm one of those people who prefers his e-reader. I'm getting old. I don't want to deal with the tiny print. I sold off my entire collection of the Wheel of Time series only because it wasn't signed. If it had been signed, I'd held on to those things, but
Yeah.
it wasn't. So I was just like, I can't read this tiny print anymore.
I don't have room for the books.
So yeah, I unless I'm getting it signed, most of the time I'm not buying a book in print.
So, yeah. just-
All right.
Once again, I'm J.E. Pittman. You can call me James. I've got a bunch of projects out. You can find them all on halfacrepond.com. But new for MarsCon, pre-order for Pandora Squad is live now. It drops April 9th.
Nice.
And it is the essentially magic in space. They're sent off to this planet, super powered, supercharged, kill some bugs, probably die in the process. I've got all the cards for Pandora, Elliot, and I have some swanky badge stickers for Pandora Squad up here if you guys want to come chat for a
Don't
second.
forget about Felix.
So Felix Chance, my main series, Walk in Twilight Zone, Dash of Doctor Who.
I bought one.
There you go.
All right. Thank
That
you.
just sounds like fun.
It's so fun to write. I hope people like reading it.
Yes, you can.